Hello and welcome to Six Train Therapy. I'm DJ Mayday.
And I'm Professor S, your therapist to the stars.
Yes, yes. How was your week?
It was good.
Yeah, anything
Actually,
fun?
it was a very good week, and I'm enjoying your energy.
All right, let's go. Let's go.
So today, are you gonna frame our conversation
Oh,
today?
yes. Today we're going to talk about this special month, Black History Month. And I'm going to frame the topic with the definition and how long it's been going on.
And this is 2023 because I might be watching this in 2030.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
According to the ADL,
Who's the ADL?
oh, come on. Why are you going to ask me that?
Who's the ADL? You say according to that could be a neo-Nazi group,
No, it's not. It's
Anti-Defamation League.
yes, that's exactly right.
Jeez.
I was testing you.
No, you weren't. You're
Yes,
being
I was.
testy.
Well, anyway, according to my framework, since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month, which is an annual celebration of achievements by Black Americans and a time for recognizing the central role of Black people in U.S. history. Black History Month grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of historian Carter G. Woodson and other prominent Black people. So that's just the framework to kind of our topic today, which is Black History Month.
Right.
Um, Black History Month for me has always, it seems to be getting more and more important in general in American life. And, but 1976, I don't remember it that far back, to be honest with you.
Do you remember what happened yesterday?
I do remember what happened yesterday, but not 1976. Such a jerk.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's becoming more and more important. And for the first time, I think ever in my life, I actually heard people saying Happy Black History Month.
Oh, okay.
I've never experienced that before either. So that's like a whole new thing for me, and for people in, I think in general.
Hmm.
I'm of a Hispanic heritage, but I'm always around, Black Americans and Black Islanders, and so I definitely feel a kinship. So I'm interested in Black History Month. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm just
Why are you laughing at me for?
well. I'm not actually not laughing at
You're
you,
laughing with me?
and I'm not laughing with you either. I don't know. It's just this idea that okay, well, maybe for you, people are saying, Happy Black History Month, but I mean, I don't. I just that's just not my experience. Let's put it that way. It's
Uh,
not my
all
experience.
right, let me ask you a question. So I'm from.
And
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
no, no, no. I'm just gonna say that. See, I guess because my perspective is Black History Month is American history, period.
Period.
And so the fact that it's Black History Month is almost like here's a cookie, right? Maybe when it was with Negro Week, maybe you had like half a cookie. So now it's the month. Now you have a whole cookie. But if you look back on our history here, Black/African people have been here as long as white people have been here.
Absolutely. They
So,
fought in every
so,
war. Every
so how do
struggle.
you distill that into a month? Is where I'm coming from. But the way it's been taught in our schools, we see it separately.
Right. Can is it possible that's a tad bit cynical?
No, I think it's close to the
Okay. All
factual
right.
than
All right. All
cynical.
right.
No,
Well,
I really do
no.
because, like
I
you just said it, every war African Americans have fought.
mhm.
Um, they were here when the colonizers were here.
Right. They were here before
But the,
Christopher Columbus.
well, what I mean, if we go with what you're just saying, it's even more relevant that it's American history. These are aspects of American history that a lot of times in our culture we don't want to talk about.
Right.
So then we have to put a microscope or a magnifying glass over this group of our society to then go, oh wow, they really have gone through this. Oh, they really have. That's how I see it.
I
Why are
see
you
I,
taking a deep breath?
because I see it that way. I
Why
know
are you
where
sighing? Why are you doing a
because
a silent
I
sigh?
feel your pain and I understand. I'm from Caribbean descent, so I don't have the
I'm not
same.
feeling pain. Well, I guess I am. But you know what it is?
Mhm.
I'm feeling. I'm not feeling pain. I feel like I'm speaking what is reality. But the reality, when it's spoken, then it's like it becomes something else. Well, it's this, it's that, or it's it's the problem is that black experience has been woven into the fact black folks built the White House.
Absolutely.
So it's like, how are you going to say Black History Month? So Black on Black History Month, we talk about people who built the White House. No, it was part of our American history. If you taught this in elementary and high school, we wouldn't even be talking about Black History Month. It'll just be an aspect of our culture, the same way the Native Americans, it wouldn't be just American Indigenous People Month. It's woven into the fabric of the society. But at the same time, I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I think it is important to highlight various folks and the experience of the Americas because it is not woven into our educational system. So I understand it from that point of view.
I just think it's from a uh
A we of the world point of view.
no and see there you go again. Once again, we're going to our core like personalities. I'm a optimist. He's a realist. So my point when I hear it and I see it, I think it's an attempt to try to make up. Now it's now
Mm.
with the attempt, they've pretty much erased a lot of. They spent the last 200 years erasing Black history,
Mm-hmm.
and I see this as an attempt for America to try to re-engage again with their Black history. You know what I mean? And it is America's Black history. It's American history, like you said before. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
See, I don't even think it's. See, this is the realist or the cynicism. I don't think it's about re-engaging. It's about engaging.
right, right.
Because if you don't even know, it's not about re-engaging.
Well, I mean, there was an
It's an
engagement before, but
engagement.
it was an abusive arrangement,
Oh
so
my
to speak,
God.
beyond abusive.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just trying to
It was horrific.
horrific engagement, and now it's a re-engagement in a different way, and trying to
If you're interested.
yeah, if you're interested. But generally, when these things are like kind of repeated on the air, there's just
Okay.
sales, and this is what America is all about.
Okay.
It kind of gets woven into you, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? Eventually, I remember when Martin Luther King Day was made an official holiday.
Mm-hmm.
At first, people weren't getting their days off for that,
Mm-hmm.
but now it feels like most companies will just give you that day, like a President's Day. You know what I mean? So it's changing, and it's becoming more of what we are. But my whole thing is that, and not that you were being cynical, you were being a realist. But I think there's layers to the story. I think the history of Black Americans is the history of America, and it needs to be told together at some point. But I think bringing it to the forefront helps non-blacks,
Or blacks as well. Because
blacks
remember,
as
the
well.
history has been removed. It's not taught in high school, or whatever, so you don't even have it.
Right.
So sometimes folks of color or black folks are learning it the first time the same white folks are.
Yep.
In
You're
many
right.
ways.
You're right.
So that even reflects more of the erasure that you're talking about when folks that even look like the people we're talking about, they don't even know their history. So you may have some white kids that know more about black history than black kids.
But you're probably right about that. I
Just
mean, that
because of
definitely can happen.
Of course.
But I don't know. But it's a very delicate situation. But what I see of Black History Month and the
Why is
celebrate,
it delicate?
it's delicate for
How?
because
Because it's uncomfortable for some people?
some people, yeah.
Oh, then that's what it
So
is.
it's hard to hear. Some people to hear, the things they've done. As a group.
Well,
It's
that's
hard
the
to
thing.
hear for
But that's the thing about our
ancestors
culture.
that it was done to.
We don't want to talk about these things in this culture, especially those that may have been part of that history. Because of course, people who live now, let's say white folks that are now, they weren't part of that time, but it is part of the American experience, and there are some people that benefit from the privilege of those individuals that paved the history before them. that living now, you benefit from that privilege.
Oh, absolutely,
So that's a whole
absolutely,
nother
absolutely. I
topic.
mean, how
But
many Fortune 500 companies were built on the backs of slaves?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly,
Countless,
exactly.
countless companies that
Hmm.
never had the answer for that. I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of shit, but
But let's
as
yeah.
feeble as, and I don't mean Black history itself being feeble, but as feeble it is to try to make up for that, lack
I follow
of
where you're coming from.
storytelling,
Hmm.
it's still an attempt, and I want to hold on to the hope that
Yeah.
little bit of hope that it will change, and one day we won't say Black history, we'll say American history. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's kind of my like
I follow you.
little take on it, but
So
but
shall we?
I was like when I heard, because I was with my friend, and someone said to Happy Black History Month,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, that's dope. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? That I was like, that's dope. Is it okay if I say that? Like I was just looking to.
Of course.
Well, I'm of,
Who am I?
but that's what I'm saying.
What
I am
do I?
of
I'm not the official,
the police, the Black
police.
History Police.
I'm not the Negro police.
But like
I'm just a
I,
person.
that
Your
was
point of
just
view.
a bright moment
Right. Okay, I
for
can see
me.
it for you. Right.
Right. Like,
That
oh
it
shit.
normalized it and made it part of just a greeting.
Yes. So
I got
like
you. I follow you.
I would love that one day, soon maybe everybody says that to each other. You know what I mean? That would be
Hmm.
great. And you're gonna laugh again at my optimism, but this is what this is
No, because Malcolm Luther King would say something like that, right? With a
Malcolm Luther
black
King.
man and white
You said Malcolm
people.
Luther King.
Malcolm Martin. That's because I want to talk about Malcolm X in a few. Where he would say, black children and white children could come together and, you know, free at last, and
Right.
this come together.
When
I
I
mean,
hear
that's where
that,
you're kind of coming from, right?
yeah, but at the same time, I
The
also believe
optimism.
that the structure of racism is a ridiculous thing. So it's white children and black children. They're just fucking children. Like in my mind, like
Mm.
these are just people. You know
Okay,
what I
that's
mean?
true.
So like it still sounds very ridiculous to me
Hmm.
because of the way I think. And there you go, smiling at my
No, I'm
optimism
thinking about
again.
orange puppets and blue puppets. That's an inside joke. Well, we should talk about some things, right?
Right.
Or are we
No, yeah, yeah. Go
our
ahead.
general
We
our
are.
general
We are.
sparring there? But I just want to mention a few things. I just want to mention some people,
Go for it.
and then I also want to talk about my experience in the school system, because I think when I was doing research around all these individuals, there were so many people to choose from and talk about. And I said, but wait a minute. When I came to this country in 1975, I came into the ninth grade in the Bronx, and I went to school here. Well, you did too, right?
Right.
But my point is, what I learned in school was none of the things of the people that I'm about to talk about. So I wanted to just mention them, but also talk about my experience in school.
Go for it.
So the first person I want to mention is Claudette Colvin. In 1955, she 9 months before Rosa Parks, there was Claudette Colvin, and she decided not to sit in the back of the bus.
Let's go.
So we don't always speak about Claudette, right? And there's a whole different point of view at why they chose uh, Rosa Parks versus Claudette. There's a whole discussion around that.
That's interesting too. I didn't know until like last year that was orchestrated.
Yes.
That she would be the person who's going to resist, and it was all built around her. And there were a couple of wild reasons why she was chosen too, as well. But go ahead. Yeah, I just learned that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's that person. Yeah, because if I go into that, it's going to take it down other
Yeah.
streets. But no, I will say this because this is part of it. They used Rosa Parks more because she was a lighter skinned woman, and she gave a different kind of optics than Claudette Colvin, that was a darker complexion woman, and that was seen as, okay, Rosa would be the face of it. But someone did it 9 months before and went through similar stuff, but they did not give her those kind of props. So that's one. Matthew Henson, he went to the North Pole 7 times. Let's see what I got as my notes. He went to the Arctic 7 times with Robert Peary, who was the explorer, and he was with Robert Peary for like 23 years doing exploratory stuff. So we don't know much about him, right?
Hmm.
There's a guy that went to the, and then the last person, which a lot of people know, is Malcolm X. Um, when in 1964, and this is the part that really makes me think about him because I had to read the autobiography of Malcolm X in college. And when I read the autobiography, it changed my, it added so much depth to this person. But the piece I wanted to bring is that when he in 64 went to Mecca, and I think he said he was what, 39? He went to Mecca and he saw all these people of all colors and races, Muslim, at Mecca walking around the I don't know the name of
Yeah, I'm
the
trying to think of
queue,
it too now.
but the point is that he felt like a human being there. He felt he never felt more like a human being than when he went to, I think, Hijaz. Is that
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
if I
yeah.
said it correctly, the pilgrimage? And he talked about being in the airport and seeing people of different complexions and colors hugging each other, welcoming each other to the their pilgrimage. People were coming to the airport to go to the pilgrimage, and he said, "I felt like a human being for the first time." And so what? So he started his detachment from the Nation of Islam because now he had a spiritual awakening as a result of seeing the variety of the, he felt he was in the place of God for him, which is Allah, and in front of God all this variety of human beings were on the same spiritual
I mean, I
path.
guess that's like just being a captive in the United States. I mean, it's very different than the rest of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially parts of the world like that, the Middle East, where it's like you have Northern Africa,
Hmm.
Southern Europe,
Hmm.
and it's like that's where it meets. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
it's just that's
So that
super
was
interesting.
fascinating for me. And when you know about his story even before he got to the Nation of Islam, that's a whole, I mean, just that was a huge story right there. But I just wanted to bring those folks up because a lot of times we don't really know their story, you know?
Mm.
So you want to say something more before I talk about my educational experience in the New York school system?
Well, just to piggyback, when I was a kid before the Million Man March.
Hmm.
Was it before the Million Man March? It was one of the marches on Washington. Farrakhan was having a rally
Yeah.
in Harlem, and I went to that rally.
Hmm.
And he, this man can talk anybody into doing anything. The way he commanded that crowd was
Hmm.
crazy, and he was speaking facts.
Hmm.
So he's a very powerful. He was a very powerful speaker, and if and he's touted as not as a lesser speaker than Malcolm X, which I can't even imagine how him speaking would be. So like I just
Hmm.
always think of that. Like I got a little taste of Minister Louis Farrakhan. I could only imagine what Malcolm would have been like.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Well, especially when you watch some of his stuff. I mean, he's very, I saw him being interviewed in England by a British journalist and asking him all kinds of questions about black nationalism and his politics and so on. Very, very well put together, meaning that his not flustered by questions,
no, no, no.
not, and always kept a
Cool as a
focus
cucumber.
on his, very focused on his message and his story. So yeah. So anything else you want to bring up
Well, no.
around?
Why don't you finish some part? Did you have something more you wanted to
Oh yeah.
go for it?
Well, I wanted to talk about my experience in high school and what I was left with. So I went to school in the Bronx
Uh-huh.
during the '70s,
Same.
and not during the
Not the
'70s,
'70s.
well,
Yeah, yeah.
because
Not
I'm
the.
like your grandfather,
No, please stop. Not that much. Go ahead.
Well, anyway. So, so I wrote down three things that I took away from school when it came to this kind of topic, right? And so the three things was the term manifest destiny, the melting pot, and Lincoln freed the slaves and Dr. Martin Luther King. Those are the three things when I think of culture and this country and where black people kind of fit. So one of the things was manifest destiny, and why that stays in my head, I don't know. But it's the belief that it was ordained by God. For those that believe that um, philosophy, which there were many, that said America has been ordained by God to expand across America and spread their capitalism and their culture across the the continent. And so, with that view, with also a religious kind of backing or
No, it was
validation.
more than backing. It was
Well, it's the concept. It's not. It's the
no. There's a
idea.
legal documents
Hmm.
that are given. They were given permission. That certain lands, since the people who were living there weren't taking care of the land,
Hmm.
that
The people that were living there. Are you talking about Native Americans?
Native Americans, whether it be in Africa or in
That they weren't taking care of the land. I don't
that's
understand what you
that's the
mean.
premise of Manifest
Oh,
Destiny.
got you.
So they would go to the Catholic Church and say, well, this isn't, well, then, they're not taking care of the land. We can do this, this, and that and provide blah, blah,
Okay,
blah.
that
And
makes
the
sense.
church would go, okay, that makes sense. So then I deem it by God that,
That is okay.
right.
Go for
And
it.
that's kind of where the whole Manifest Destiny comes from.
Right.
And kings and queens would jockey for these
The lands.
no these rights and these terms from the
Mm,
church to be
hmm.
able to do whatever they wanted.
Oh, okay. So that
So
would be yeah.
that's
This is
some
a
foul ass
coordinated.
shit.
Is it? Yeah, and it justifies a lot of things, right?
Right,
Slavery, land,
right.
possessions, and things like resources.
And it's a way to galvanize simple-minded people. You'd be like, God told me, look,
Yeah,
so says the Pope.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
So the reason why I think Manifest Destiny um, stood out is because it meant erasing Native Americans who were here before. So how does God tell you to go and expand when there are people already here? And it wasn't until like college when I realized like that's why they're not here. That's why it's in such small number is in part manifest destiny.
Yeah, they weren't taking
So
care of the land.
so they had no problem, right? So they had no problem teaching that to me in high school and to those like why would I know about manifest destiny but I don't know about Native American culture?
Because they're still trying to push their justification down the line. This
Well,
is why we did it, and this is Manifest Destiny.
right, but I'm talking about high school.
Yeah.
Why would you teach me that but not teach at the same time
Because they're polar opposites.
native okay, but that's my
Oh,
point.
the irony. Oh, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
irony
yeah.
of it, right?
Got you, got
But
you, got
that's
you.
the calculated difference that you keep information out of the books.
Man, we have been monopolizing misinformation for
Yeah.
ever.
So the other thing that I was taught was the idea of the melting pot. So the melting pot
I kind of
was
like that one.
you do?
I don't
Of
know.
course you would. We're all melted together like one
Well, that's literally kind of who I
one
am.
bar of chocolate almonds, chocolate syrup.
I got
Well, the
actually
idea of
that.
the melting pot, though, this is from my research, and then I'll tell you what I actually
Okay.
feel about it. So the idea of the melting pot is that immigrants will come to this country, but the idea was to minimize or erase your cultural background.
Hmm.
So you don't see like let's say in Puerto Rico, like don't speak Spanish. Like how many people who their parents said, look, don't speak Spanish, just speak English.
My parents
Right. So it's a similar thing. It's just to minimize your culture so that you can blend into the
get along,
society.
right?
So that's the idea of the melting pot. Is to minimize your culture. It doesn't mean you're there erased because it's part of what it's part of who you are. But the melting pot idea was to homogenize,
Well,
bring your
I mean, you
differences
have to
down.
expect that when you move to another country to live there.
However, this is the second part.
Okay.
Black folks are not the melting pot.
No.
We don't melt. Black people do not melt.
What the
Now,
hell is
however,
that?
However, let me just
What does that
let me
mean?
just speak. I'll tell you what it means, but let me just speak outside on two sides of my neck, right? So the other side of my neck is when black folks kind of whiten themselves,
Mm.
whether it's the way they speak, and I'm not saying that you can't speak quote unquote properly, but there's a conscious effort to minimize their blackness,
Is that like a
right?
code switching,
Associate.
or is that?
Well, code switching is different because code switching means you go back and forth.
Mm.
What I'm talking about is black folks that just
Adopt that?
right and distance themselves from other black people, right?
Hmm.
But code switching is a survival technique. It's almost a different topic.
Hmm.
But
Okay, okay,
my
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 bad.
my point is that so for example, I went on a boat ride around what do you call it, the Circle Line. So they were doing the guy was talking about what New York and blah blah. And they told this is Ellis Island, and 40% of the immigrants came through here and blah blah blah. And I said to my friend who was a Jewish woman, I said, yeah, but that's not how my people got here.
No, you came on the other boat
You
on the
know what
other
I mean? We
side of
came
the
up
country.
no, because that's the whole thing. I said we didn't. That's not how folks that look like me came here. So everybody, so there's a group of our society that identified with Ellis Island, and not to say there weren't black folks that came through Ellis Island for however small the percentage was, but the black experience was very, very different.
Hmm.
Even though all these people came from Europe, all these folks came for this, the same reasons for better quality of life and better than the country that they came from. But the melting pot idea was for you to minimize your cultural background so you can blend into this culture. But my point is that as a person of color, I won't say darker complexion, but I'm going to use that because that was often used in terms of passing
Right.
and in terms of who got jobs and things like that, or who didn't get jobs. But the point is that I don't think, especially as I got older and more through especially undergrad, the melting pot is a false idea, and it's definitely a false idea for black folks. Now, I think one of my teachers said it's not so much the melting pot; it was more like tapestry, that the colors are still there, but coming together, it creates one kind of colorful tapestry.
It's like splitting hairs a little bit, no?
Well, I don't know. I
The
mean, it's just a
soup,
way. It's just a way that
tapestry.
it was taught by two different people. But I was very clear that the idea of the melting pot is one of the concepts that this country kind of projects out into the world. We are like a melting pot.
Well, I'll tell you why I like the melting pot concept, and
Tell me.
and I it's not because I believe that we're in this like delicious stew and we meld perfectly together in a fucking I don't believe that, but what I do believe is like it's a hopeful concept that's
Yes.
achievable, and like as fucked up and as shitty as we think a lot of American history was, especially 400 years ago till very recently to present, the concept of America almost forces itself to be better, right?
Okay.
It's
Conceptually
conceptually, if you it,
and
the
actually
Constitution
and
actually, yeah. If the
I had
Constitution
to throw
says
that.
all men are created
I had
equal,
to throw that out to you because I
no,
want to
yeah.
let you know I'm with you, bro.
If the Constitution says all men are created, this is just an example,
Yes.
created equal.
Yes.
A couple of generations keep looking at that. That's going to become. I feel like it's getting closer and closer to the pure concept of what it's supposed to be, and that's how I feel like the melting pot
Mm,
concept is.
mm.
You know what I mean? Like I could almost say, the Constitution and just that phrase alone was a catalyst that launched,
Mm-hmm.
the civil rights movement. You know, generations later, but it was the thing that kind of spawned that.
Okay.
You could harken
The
back and
the
say, "This
the
is what you
the
said."
well, I think that the concept of women are created equal was definitely a new and noble idea compared to Europe,
Right.
right? Where you had a huge separation of classes and so on. The thing is that which we are talking from a Black History Month point of view. So from a
Right.
Black history, the Black experience in this country, that at that time black folks weren't even considered human.
Right.
So it's hard to like go with all men were created equal, but yet in 1950, 400 eight whatever years later, now we could, and we fought for civil rights. You know, you don't see that happen. You don't watch like documentaries of Europeans getting attacked by dogs and so on. It's a different experience. It's not that other people's experiences are worse or whatever. It's different. So when you talk about the black experience and all men created equal, you've got one. You are 3/5 human.
Yes,
So
yes.
that
No, no, no,
that
no, no.
was no. But bear with me because we need to talk about what the foundation of where this comes from and how it manifests in different groups or people. And again, we're talking about Black History Month. This is part of the history,
Right.
and you have to look at the foundation of things to see where when the tree is growing, you have to look at the roots. You can't just look at the tree.
All right, Bob
So
Marley.
doesn't that sound very
That,
poetic?
all right,
right?
Bob Marley. Let's go.
Bob Marley. So
Preach.
no, but he smoked trees though. That's the thing. Anyhow, so
He definitely did smoke some
so you're 3/5 human. So all men are really not created equal. Number one,
trees. Right.
and then you had, I think, about 12 presidents who were slave owners.
Right.
So when you talk about all men are created equal, you're talking about 400, maybe 500 years of black folks having to go through this whole experience until they can fight in the 60s to be said. There were even protests where the protest said, "I am a man."
Mm-hmm.
So you don't see other people going, "Well, I am a man."
No,
Because
this is America's super dark history.
My
That
point
that-
is,
that-
but my point is, you don't teach it because that's
Right.
part of American history. You don't teach it in high school. I had to get it in undergrad, and it created me feeling angry. And I said to myself,
that's why they don't
maybe
wanna say
that's
it.
why they don't teach it in high school
Definitely.
because folks will get angry.
I can't tell you how many things like that. I used to have friends that were like 5%ers. I don't even know, and they would be talking like this crazy. I'm like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen.
But I think you have to explain to our listeners.
5%ers. I don't.
Who are the 5%? What was the 5%?
I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not trying to
Okay.
slander or poo-poo on anybody, but they were very. In my time when I was a kid, 5%ers were like when you ever associated with yourself, you associated with higher thinking and like black pride, and it was they. I don't know where they got their facts from because I thought myself as not a learned person, but a pretty aware and like conscious and open to listening to things and some of the things I had never heard of. You know what I mean? Like,
So we may need to add that in a link below.
yeah, and they would always drop these. I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. I remember one thing they told me. They said Ethiopia was the only country that was never dominated by Europe all throughout, and I was like, that's not true. And I was like, the whole place has been chopped up and parceled between all the European countries. So I was like, that's not true.
So what do you think now?
I went and I actually literally did the research, and it turns out Ethiopia was never conquered by
true.
Europeans.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
How did they manage that landlocked country? That's some Wakanda shit right
But
there.
here's the point. If you're not taught that, especially as a black child,
Yeah.
then all you think of is that Europeans dominated Africa and that's all there was. And there was no other culture even before the Europeans,
And in Africa, I'm sorry.
No,
but
please.
just to tie that all back, Africa was fighting the whole time with Europe. I mean, the whole time they were fighting with Europe and beating them and losing and beating them and going back and forth. And it was a battle for the continent for a long, long, long time.
But here's the part about the human condition, right? The human condition is that Africans were also fighting each other.
Right.
And so we can't separate the story of colonialism in Africa without talking about, and we're not going to get into it here, but that, we as human beings were tribal. No matter what, Europe,
It's our nature.
China, and Asia, it doesn't matter. We're all tribal people, and tribes fight against other tribes for resources, for dominance, whatever it is. I was watching something the other day, which I had no idea that Vietnam was invaded by China for like 1,000 years. The French took over parts of Vietnam for I don't know how many years,
yeah.
and I had no idea until today.
Yeah, the French were there fighting there
and
first.
So the thing is that, just to bring it back to Black History Month and the idea that we're not taught certain things in high school, because that's pretty much where I'm coming from, was my experience in high school around Black history, or even how Black history is woven into, let's say, Native American history or even Dutch history. So where Central Park is, that was an African American community area,
Yeah.
and that was taken over. They were pushed back or out. And I went on a walking tour actually years ago, and they could show you some of the remnants of houses
Oh yeah.
that the
In the park?
Black folks in the park.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, make a long story short. So those things you're not taught, and you live in New York, that you're not taught those. So the only major things was, including those things that I weren't taught, was Lincoln freed the slaves, and Martin Luther King was a good guy.
Right.
That was it.
That's
So
pretty much
Manifest Destiny, The Melting Pot, Lincoln freed the slaves, Martin Luther King was a good guy, Malcolm X was, I didn't even get the Malcolm
No,
X
they didn't
part,
even talk about
but
him.
definitely Martin Luther King. So that was my education around, okay, let's say Black history, anything that involved Black story or the American culture. Because like you said, the concept of the melting pot has like a sense of our vision, idealized self. But in my mind, especially as I went to undergrad and so on, in my mind, the melting pot didn't really include the African American. It didn't include where the African American story, or one place where the African American story excelled was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they had Black folk, because they were separate,
Wall Street.
but the Black Wall Street. So they owned hospitals, doctors, dentists. They existed in an abundance in this area, which was at one point just erased, massacred. And so people don't even know that even existed. You see some documentaries these days, but
Yeah, but I never.
that was a
10
part-
years ago, I never heard of that. I never heard of Tulsa. Oklahoma.
So my point is, that's things like that where you had a culture happening for decades. Years later, even if you're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, they don't even know what happened there.
Right. Well,
You know?
I think they're
So-
learning more now, but that's the
Okay.
consequence, right? Like the consequence of erasing culture and history. You have to now find these things and reintroduce it to a group of people.
And that's if you want to. That's if you're interested, even searching for it. Mine came from being in an undergraduate school and wondering, what about my history? What other stories that my family's from Barbados, by the way, right? So my parents from Barbados. I was raised in England, so I'm a first generation immigrant, right? So I understand the immigrant experience. I come from that experience, but I didn't know what was the story behind the African Americans, the Caribbeans, whatever the folks from the African diaspora, what were their experiences here? But specifically, I was more exposed to the African American experience, and there was nothing there. What I found out later on was that there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and so why wasn't this taught in high school? That was ultimately what I came out with, and so the idea of educating myself, educating my son around these things. So,
Yeah, I mean,
That's
it was
basically-
kind of the same for me. It was a discovery. Like, it was like my first job. I met a couple of these cats, 5%ers, and they were always talking shit. And I was like, oh, that's dope, and they would always keep talking. And I was like, that's not true. And I would research, and some of it would be true. You know what I mean? And I was part of that. And then it was, the Louis Farrakhan rally. There was always publications of different things in the area. And I was just absorbing all that and appreciating that. And I'm like, none of this is known to anybody.
right.
The first time I heard of Mansa Musa, I was like,
Who is that? Who's Benson Musa?
he was I remember they would always drop these gems. They would always say the richest man that ever lived was Black, African. Mansa Musa was a king. I forgot of where. Shit. He was a king, and he was literally he went to visit Egypt, and he bankrupted Egypt solely by handing out gold bricks to poor people, and then he bankrupted their economy just by visiting them. That's how rich he was.
Okay.
So you hear them talk like this, and you're like, never heard of them, but these are real people. So I think the rediscovering.
But we would need to add that to.
Oh yeah.
To our to our linked information, because it is an interesting story. The 5%ers. It's just I don't know fully the story, but when I was in high school, there was the 5%ers.
Yeah.
Right? They were like almost like an elite group of African American, usually African American males actually.
Yeah, they had a whole
my experience.
Pathology about it, and like
ideology,
but a pathology too with numbers, and like I was like, I
see what you mean.
I had no idea what any of that was, but it was super interesting. Some of it was true. A lot of it was true. So, that's how information got out before.
Yes.
So you it wasn't even like there
wasn't
even
these gems. There were gems in it,
right?
But then you had to kind of
but there was no place to go look,
right?
Especially when I was a kid, there was no internet the way it is now. You know what I mean? So.
And then are we almost out? Or no?
I think we're almost out.
So the one last thing too is when I was in undergraduate, it was so transformative. Is when I discovered Harlem and the multiple bookstores that used to be down there. I would go down there and find. Oh my gosh, was it? I think it was Sex and Race. I'm not sure. There's a whole series of books, and I would go to Schomburg, and actually Arthur Schomburg was Puerto Rican and black.
Yeah.
So his story about having the largest research documents of the African American experience is there.
Yeah. I just want to quickly before we sign out, I just wanted to give shout outs to Black Americans that we don't really talk about, only because we hear all the big names, and the more popular names, but I just want to give shout outs to people that affect our like daily life. Like Frederick McKinley. He developed refrigerator equipment. He has 40 patents in the 1930s. He began inventing automatic refrigeration, air cooling units for trucks, trains, ships, and planes. Can you imagine a life without that right now? So that was an interesting one. All right, George Washington Carver. Everybody's heard of him. He's the guy who brought us peanut butter, right?
But he did so much more.
He did so much more. He created 518 new products from the very same crops of peanuts and sweet potatoes, and they included ink, dye, soap, cosmetics, flour, vinegar, and synthetic rubber. So like that wasn't, the peanut butter was just the tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned. All these other things were so much more important. So just little things that contributed to our daily lives. Madam C.J. Walker, I don't know if anybody's familiar with her. She's the first black female millionaire. I don't know, that just screamed out at me. It was interesting. Garrett Morgan, he invented the traffic light. I don't even know where we would be without that. Alexander Miles, who basically recreated the modern elevator. Before him, it was hand cranked. Everything was hand done. The doors were closed and everything. Before him, that's how it was. Now, and because of him, Alexander Miles, we have elevators that the doors close, and it's automatic now. So, I mean, these are life-changing.
So these are great examples, right, of history that's not taught in like those could be taught in high school.
Yeah.
There's nothing revolutionary about them. However, psychologically, especially as a psychotherapist, what we experience as a young person influences how we see ourselves, and then how we see ourselves as adults of what is possible. What if you were taught this throughout your high school, even junior high school, elementary school? You could actually think, wow, I could be an inventor. Yeah, I could be a millionaire. I have a possibility to do these things.
But if it was across the board from decades that it should have been when these things were happening, it would also influence and change the way other people saw black people. So,
and then we get into We Are the World.
I like that.
That's how it happens.
Just one more shout out.
That's how it happens.
One more shout out to,
of course,
Jerry Lawson. the black engineer who created video games. The late Jerry Lawson helped invent the first video game console with interchangeable games. So that
I only even found out about that today.
that is like
that guy.
I've known him about him for a couple years, but that guy right there. Thank you, appreciate you, bro.
And lastly, because I don't remember his name, but the person that invented the Super Soaker.
Yeah.
He's a black
He was
guy.
a NASA engineer and he invented the Super Soaker.
Yeah.
So I think that's it.
Yep, that's it.
I'm DJ Mayday.
Professor S, your psychotherapist to the stars.
Thank you for listening to Six String Therapy.
Subscribe
Comment
and
like.
but especially subscribe.
Yeah. Peace.
See you. Bye.